The morning began with the softest things steamed curling from a kettle, the strawberry brightness of jam on toast, and the orchestral patter of small feet thudding across a ceiling that had learned the pattern of their chaos. In Adelaide Cottage, where linen curtains tame the light and ordinary life can sometimes pretend to be enough, Catherine whisked eggs and leaned into the ritual. The kitchen was warm. It smelled like safety. For a few precious minutes, it felt like a world where crowns were toys, and duty could wait outside with the rain. Upstairs, Charlotte accused, Louis shrieked, and George, already growing into a thoughtful, quiet, tried, as he always did, to keep one game from becoming a war. At the table, William scrolled through the impersonal currency of mornings, a briefing here, a line item there, the steady hum of a life that belongs to a country before it belongs to a man. His shoulders were loose for once. His eyes, when they lifted, were tender in a way cameras never capture. "They're going to demolish the house if we leave them," he said, smiling with half his mouth. "Let them," Catherine answered, whisking with theatrical defiance. "We'll rebuild." It was their joke, the gentle lie. In truth, some things, once broken, refused to be new again. The phone cut through it. Not the private one with its forgiving chime, but the other, the state one. The instrument that makes a kitchen feel like a corridor. William's hand hovered above his coffee and froze. Color retreated. Posture changed. The quiet world tilted. He answered on the third ring with the voice he uses when the country is watching. Catherine's hands didn't stop so much as forget how to move. She watched him listen. That subtle tightening of the jaw, that fist she knows he doesn't know he's making. Upstairs, the children quieted as if sound itself knew better. "Yes," he said to the silence. "Of course, I'll be there within the hour." He didn't lower the phone. He sat with it pressed to his ear like an anchor he wasn't ready to cut free. Catherine turned off the stove, set the whisk down where it wouldn't clatter, and crossed to him. "What is it?" "Thomas," he said, and his own name sounded far away inside that single word. "Not father's office, one of the courtiers." He said, "There's been a development regarding the succession. I'm to come immediately." There are phrases that don't have harmless versions. A development regarding the succession is one of them. "Your father," she said, though it didn't feel like a question. "I don't know." He stood so fast his chair skidded, then fumbled at the familiar lifeline of another call. No answer, straight to voicemail. He called Harry. Voicemail again, the hollow evidence of distances that used to be shorter. George appeared in the doorway, hair tousled by sleep and curiosity. "Dad, you look weird." William tried on reassurance like an unfitting jacket. It hung wrong, but he wore it anyway. "Just work, darling." George looked through him with Diana's eyes and too much comprehension for a boy who should still be learning wonder before he learns poise. Catherine redirected with a mother's mercy. "Gets dressed. Breakfast soon." But when the footfalls retreated upstairs, she held William's face in her hands until he had to meet her gaze. "Whatever this is, we face it together," she said. He nodded, but dread had already drawn its map. The M4 was a ribbon of reluctance. Monday traffic bulged and slowed. Every brake light another heartbeat spent in not knowing. A development regarding the succession. The phrase nested inside itself, each repetition hatching darker possibilities. Abdication. No, his father had waited a lifetime for the crown. He would not relinquish it, so his regency, perhaps. But then why wasn't the call from the king? Why wasn't the heir asked with the tenderness of explanation, not the bluntness of command? Weeks flickered back like streetlights seen from the corner of an eye. Camilla's team, calling more often than his father's. Her presence at state functions swelling to fill the space his illness hollowed out. Interviews calibrated around continuity and steadiness. The practiced fluency of someone who has stood near power long enough to speak its language and is no longer content to translate. Buckingham Palace rose, unblinking. He had walked these corridors as a child, ran them to the echo of a grief the building couldn't absorb. He learned long ago that the palace devours softness and prefers its figures in relief. Heir, sovereign, consort, enemy. He allowed himself the comfort of ritual credentials, nods. The choreography of gate and garden till the escort led him left instead of right, past private study, toward the rooms reserved for performance and decree. "The blue drawing room, sir. They're waiting." The room was designed to dwarf both thought and courage. Light poured across gold and blue. Portraits gazed down with the calm cruelty of precedence. Camilla sat in a chair no one sits in without a reason. On either side, senior courtiers whose smiles never quite reached their eyes. A constitutional lawyer waited nearby, briefcase latch glinting. Charles was nowhere. "Where is my father?" William asked. He didn't waste a heartbeat pretending he couldn't see the shape of this tableau. "Resting," Camilla said, the syllables precise, the sympathy practiced. treatments. You understand? We thought it best to speak with you first. The architecture of a usurpation is built from words that sound like care. What is this? A conversation about stability. The country requires continuity, she said, turning slightly as if to include the lawyer inside the gentleness of her logic. There are provisions the Regency Acts, William said. Yes, they name the heir apparent. Under most circumstances, the lawyer inserted too smooth to be casual, but there can be flexibility if there are concerns about readiness or availability. Readiness, William repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar bitterness. Mine, you have very young children, Camilla offered, concern wrapping around the words like velvet around a blade. George is 11, Charlotte is 9, Louis is 6. They need their father present. The Regency would be a brutal demand on anyone, on me, he said, stripping the sentence of protective fabric. On anyone, she repeated, whereas someone with decades of experience beside the king could provide a seamless say it. He said, you want to be regent, I want what is best for the country. He felt the old ache flared the ache with his mother's voice at its center. He kept his anger banked behind the discipline that has always been mistaken for softness. Then why isn't the king here to say so? No one answered. Silence makes accomplices of bystanders. He watched their eyes choose their shoes, the carpet, the ceiling anywhere but the simple truth. Papers, the lawyer said, as if the word itself could normalize what the papers are for. He opened the case, neat stacks with blue backings and a sickly sheen of inevitability. Your signature would expedite, you mean, before my father wakes, before the public understands, before Parliament loses the taste for this. It is temporary, a courtier said, voice oiled with reason. A transitional arrangement during treatment. And who decides when the transition ends? William asked. A committee of the conveniently loyal, perhaps. They hadn't expected steel. They often don't from those who prefer diplomacy to drama. But he was not a novice. He was an air race inside the machinery. He knew which gears grind and which give. He had learned, the hardest way, what happens when the machine decides a person is an obstacle. William, Camilla said, stepping closer, her tone dropping into intimacy as if the relationship could be borrowed for leverage. This isn't a contest. It's a safeguard. You are prepared to be king one day, not in the middle of a constitutional ambiguity while your father there is no ambiguity, he replied. If the sovereign cannot act, the heir acts. That is law. That is custom. That is the point. You're angry, she said. I understand. Don't pretend this is about my feelings, he answered. It's about your ambition. The words landed like a gavel. Something cracked in the room, the fragile veneer that keeps truth looking like civility. Her eyes hardened. Your father agrees, she said. Then fetch him. He is resting. Because he doesn't know, William said. Because you've arranged a play while he is too weak to stand center stage. He took out his phone and set it on the diplomatic edge of the moment. Catherine, he said when she answered, voice steady now in the way of someone who has decided. Ring the Queen Consort's protection. Where is my father? And does he know about a meeting in the blue drawing room concerning succession and regency? I need confirmation. Now, a beat. Consider it done, she said. He ended the call and met Camilla's gaze. 5 minutes, he said, almost kindly, then the truth will arrive. You're making a mistake, she said. No, he replied. I'm ending one. He turned to the gallery, courtiers, counsel, careerist. If you participated in this, he said, soft enough to force them to lean in, you will resign within 24 hours. If not, I will remove you as my first act as regent. Please don't test my memory. He didn't wait for replies. The palace expects obedience to tone as much as to rank. He walked out with purpose loud enough to rattle protocol, corridors brimming with portraits of victories that were, at their core, simply survivals. A young equerry jogged to catch him. Sir, please, protocol, how long have they been planning this? William asked without slowing. I don't know you do. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 6 weeks. 8. The young man, trapped between fear of authority and fear of conscience, swallowed. Since the last scan, he whispered, when the treatment wasn't working. Thank you, William said. This conversation never happened. Clarence's house smelled like paper and old sunlight. He took the stairs 2 at a time, tamping down the dread that kept trying to tip his balance. He knocked once, then entered the room where his father sat with a blanket across his knees, glasses low, pen poised, smaller, yes, thinner, but the eyes those remained. William, Charles asked, startled by the suddenness of a son crashing the quiet. Is everything no? William said. He told the whole thing without adornment, the way you report a fire you've just stamped out with your shoes, the summons, The room, the papers, the pitch, the lie of necessity. Charles listened, and the journey moved across his face in reluctant stages: confusion, disbelief, comprehension, shame. He removed his glasses with hands that trembled less from illness than from a grief that has nowhere soft to fall. She said she was helping, he whispered. She said she was helping herself, William said, gentler than he felt. I'm sorry, I should have seen it, Charles murmured. I should have protected you. Protected all of it. We're here now, William said. We can fix what is still fixable. Charles nodded once, a small, regal motion that made him look, for a moment, like a young prince again. Call the council, he said. Today we will remove any room for invention. You're strong enough. I am king enough, he answered, and for a breath, the illness retreated in the wake of an older, deeper sinew. The council chamber filled with the low thunder of power taking its seats. Ministers arrived with immaculate indifference. The archbishop's purple cut the room like a bruise. Constitutional minds opened thick files as if words could be armored. The notice had been carefully vague. Everyone sensed the truth beneath the varnish. Camilla entered poised for vindication. She wore a formal day dress and a countenance that suggested inevitability. One more ceremony, one more signature. But the room did not rise. That was the first fracture. Then Charles entered, and the room rose like a tide. He looked terrible and entirely sovereign. He sat at the head. William stood at his right. The tableau answered its own questions. I am ill, the king said, voice thinner than memory but resolute. I am not incapacitated. He allowed the physician to say in clinical terms what the country preferred to dress in euphemism. Stage, treatment, pain, and then the unfashionable clarity. Cognition intact, capacity present. Illness does not negate sovereignty. William spoke briefly, words chosen with a precision good lawyers would envy. He pledged to the framework that makes crowns tools instead of trophies. He spoke of stewardship, not hunger. He looked directly at Camilla when he said, some confuse proximity for primacy, access for authority. Succession is not claimed, it is kept in trust. The vote was unanimous. The line held. Then came the strange, shuddering moment that history folds into footnote and whispers. The Lord President asked the Queen Consort to withdraw, not suggested, asked. She rose, dignity stitched together with will, and crossed the room while centrists watched from frames, and living eyes followed without blinking. The door closed with a soft, devastating click. Later, in the king's private study, titles fell away, leaving two men who hadn't always known how to be father and son. Charles stared at the garden his mother had loved, and for a while nobody spoke. I was blind, he said at last. Not by love, perhaps, by need. I wanted to believe as well, William admitted. For your sake, for calm, for the child in me who wanted a simple ending. Charles breathed, a harsh little laugh that wasn't amusement. There are no simple endings. No, William said. Only honest ones. My time is not what it was, Charles said. Optimism is a kind word. We use all the kind words we can, William replied, and all the true ones. You'll begin shadow duties, Charles said, shifting back into the work that has always been his refuge. Not because I am gone, but because we won't pretend anymore. I'm afraid I'm not ready, William confessed, the admission escaping before pride could catch it. No one ever is, Charles said. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. The weights light and immense at once. Your mother would be proud. The words were a key in a door William hadn't realized he kept locked from the inside. He nodded, because if he spoke, a boy might answer where a prince is expected. Night gathered like a cloak as Charles returned to the rooms he shared with his wife. She sat in the dark without turning on the light, diamonds catching only the suggestion of reflection. He lowered himself into the opposite chair. I did it for us, she said, voice raw from the strain of certainty failing. You are dying. I was securing our legacy. It was never ours, he answered, not cruelly, not kindly, simply. It belongs to the line, to the nation, to those who come after us. You earned the right to stand beside me, not the right to stand in front of him. She didn't argue because there was nothing left to trade in but honesty, and honesty has never been her preferred currency. He outlined, with the politeness of a verdict, the boundaries she would not cross again. Ceremonies, smiles, no statecraft, appearances, not arrangements. Consort, not regent. I loved you, he said at the door, not looking back. I gave up so much for you. It still was not enough. The door closed on the sound of a crown becoming a circle that no longer included her headlights, swept across the gravel at Adelaide Cottage, and the house answered by being itself, warm windows, a bicycle on its side, a life the world likes to believe is simple. Catherine waited at the glass, He could see the read of his day on her face before he reached the door. He stepped into her arms, and the war retreated a little. "How bad?" she asked softly. He told her the shape, not the details. The meeting, the attempt, the council, the vote. She listened with the practical outrage of someone whose first dynasty is the one that sleeps down the hall. "She went after you," Catherine said quietly. "After them. She went after anything not tied down," he replied. "Father made it clear, never again. But it's all real now," he said. "Not in some distant, comfortable future. It's happening. And when it does, it's us." "Not tonight," she said, placing a fingertip to his lips. "Tonight you're a father, and their children, and that is holy work." George's light was a blade of gold against the hall's dark. William knocked and found him reading history because sometimes the burden nicknames itself curiosity. "Was it about Grandpa?" George asked, voice carefully neutral like adults who think their feelings are impolite. "In part," William said. "Some people thought they could change the order of things." "They can't," George said, not as defiance, but as duty recited. "After Grandpa, it's you." "Yes," William said, and the word felt heavier than its size. "But before any of that, it's us. We face what comes together." Charlotte slept in a sailor's tangle around a beloved rabbit. Louis had reinvented blankets into landscapes. William stood in their doorways and made the impossible promise all parents make. "I will keep you safe from the thing that made me dot in the bedroom." Moonlight sketched the garden. "I'm not ready," he told Catherine simply. "You are," she said. "You just don't feel like it from the inside." "I wanted more time," he admitted, voice cracking on the currency that is never enough. "With them, with you, before I become." "Then we make time," she answered. "We pick it up like sea glass whenever we find it." They watched the swing set ghost along and held hands like a vow. Days learned a new rhythm. Public statements massaged reality with phrases about minor illnesses and scaled-back schedules because truth, in palaces, is often a matter of dosage. Reporters sniffed the air and wrote around what they could not confirm. William kept the children's routine intact like a bishop defending a small square of board while larger pieces clashed at diagonals. On a late afternoon gilded by the kind of light that flatters every room, the doorbell rang without prior choreography. Protection usually calls first. This time, they didn't. He rose with a caution that had become reflexed. Harry stood on the step with a suitcase and too many miles in his eyes. For a breath, the past erected itself, a wall of interviews and silences and unkind truths. Then Catherine's presence steadied the doorway beside him, and something gentler, older, reached across. "We need to talk," Harry said, voice roughened by words rehearsed and thrown away, then found again. "About Camilla, about what's coming." "Megan isn't here. It's just me, upstairs." Charlotte shouted a question down the stairs. The door remembered it was ajar. The autumn smelled like change. William stepped aside. It wasn't forgiveness. It was family, and sometimes those are different doors that open onto the same room. "Uncle Harry." The children tumbled down the steps, joy outrunning memory. Charlotte leaped. Louis climbed as if this were a game they'd invented. George hung back, smiling despite himself. "Together," Catherine whispered, so only William could hear. "Whoever comes through that door, whatever comes next, together." He closed the door on the chill and let the house hold them. The dangers hadn't dissolved. Camilla was wounded and dangerous, and wounded ambition is the kind that learns patience again. The king was still sick. The crown was still advancing like weather, inevitable, indifferent. But the room was warmer now, wider. The echo in his chest no longer sounded like an empty hall. The next morning carried the scent of rain and the anatomy of another test. Papers waited, briefings stacked, the subtle shift as aides learned a new reflex. Look to the king, then to the heir. Messages multiplied. Calendars with their careful diagonals of duty filled and refilled. William moved through it with a new steadiness, not because the weight had lessened, but because he had found the places where it sits well in family. On truth, on lines he would not let be redrawn. At Clarence House, Charles signed what he needed to sign and refused what he needed to refuse. He watched the garden his mother planted and did the most modern thing he could do with an ancient office. He told the truth early, and often. When he tired, he looked to his right. To the son who would finish what fate had not left him time to perfect. Camilla learned the limits of titles. She attended what duty demanded and found that without the quiet access to levers, rooms become rooms again. She smiled for cameras because she knows how, but the smile no longer opened doors. The grander rooms, the ones where the future is written in pencils that are only sometimes erased, were not hers now. They never had been. She had only mistaken proximity for permission. At Adelaide Cottage, ordinary life did what it always does. It made the extraordinary bearable. Catherine set out breakfast with a queen's precision and a mother's grace. George asked better questions. Charlotte performed a fierce little heart. Louis forgot shoes and found laughter. Harry helped fix a wobbly chair. William pretended not to watch the ease return to his brother's shoulders as familiarity did its quiet work. The phone rang sometimes with the wrong tone, the one that means the world is here. When it did, William answered as the man he has spent a lifetime assembling, the boy who learned grief early, the son who learned patience late, the father who learned tenderness on purpose, the heir who learned that crowns are not rewards, but relays. He took the baton his father offered, weight and all. There are corridors in Buckingham Palace that remember footsteps. They remember the march of ambition, the drag of sorrow, the quick, decisive taps of a prince who refused to sign a slow theft. In time, they will remember a different rhythm, two sets of strides entering the council chamber together, one measured by history, one by hope. On certain evenings, when the children are in bed and the house sighs into its own quiet, William stands at the window and measures his reflection against the dark outside. He thinks of the mother who warned him, the father who trusted him, the brother who returned when it mattered. He thinks, not of glory, but of guardianship, of the difference between keeping and holding, of a ring of gold that is only heavy until you share the weight of it. The future is not promised, it is prepared. And in the spaces where power once tried to make a home, something else settles now, a resolution that echoes cleanly down corridors, previously used to whispers. Catherine joins him at the glass and fits her hand into his. Whatever happens, she says. Together he answers. And this time he doesn't have to try to believe it. He does. In another room across the city, Charles closes a leather folder and lets his head rest against the chair. He is tired. He will be more tired. But the fear that used to sit at his bedside has left, because fear breeds in uncertainty. And uncertainty has been told to wait outside. The country continues because that is what countries do. Children go to school. Buses lean around corners. Newspapers overuse the word shock. And in a kitchen where toast will always smell faintly of jam and morning, the heir of a kingdom kisses the crown of his son's head. And the only proclamation he makes is the oldest one. We will do the hardest thing the right way. We will not let what is ours in trust be taken by stealth. We will not lose each other to keep a thing we only ever borrow. And the house, knowing secrets a palace never will, keeps that vow for them one ordinary morning at a time.